This is live number 102. So I've done plenty of business in the 4 months, which is great. And I'm excited to have you here tonight and tell us a little bit about Firpta Solutions. But before we get to that, I wanted to see if you could introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about who you are, where you're from. If you're not from here, how did you end up here?
Absolutely. So I am, and first of all, thank you for having me on here. This is really awesome. So I love this idea, and congratulations on your 100 episodes. That's amazing. 100 episodes or 100,000 followers?
No, well, I have both. So I have 110,000 followers, and then I just did 100 episodes.
That's amazing. That's awesome. So I am from Flint, Michigan, and I moved down to Florida about 32, maybe 34 years ago. And I'm the director of a company called Firpta Solutions, and we are an accounting firm, but we only provide services that are related specifically to Firpta, which is something that we're going to, talk about, obviously. And I got my start back, I started years ago in the mortgage industry and in the title industry, and then found my way into a tax office and just fell in love with the concept. And thankfully I had some really great people, teach me a lot of things along the way. So it just is something that's so incredibly interesting to me that I had to learn more about it. So I'm married. I've got two kids, two stepkids, and they're really patient of me and all the time that I have to spend at the office. But it's really been a really fun road these last couple years, learning more about the own subject that I'm working on, and then being able to share it with other people. Really been focusing the last year on spreading awareness about this tax issue, because a lot of people have never heard about it, and it's really important that people understand what it is and how it applies and what everyone's responsibilities are. But that's my story.
Awesome. Well, normally what I would go next is to tell us a little bit about Firpta Solutions, but I think before we do that here today, because it's like you mentioned, it's a subject that a lot of people don't know about it. I think perhaps we'll take a different route today, and if you can tell us a little bit about Firpta, what it is, requirements and all that stuff, and then then after we go into Firpta Solutions and how you can help. But I think it's important for people to understand what it is before we talk about the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you and I had an opportunity to talk briefly today, and I think I'm going to go that avenue. But I use the example of an employer and an employee. So if you've ever received a paycheck from an employer, you know that when you get your paycheck, it's not the full amount. So if you make $1,000 a week, by the time you get your paycheck, it's really only $800, because $200 had to be taken out of your paycheck, sent to the IRS as like an advanced tax payment. And then at the end of the year, you file your tax return. And if all the money that was collected out of your paycheck was more than enough to pay your taxes, then you get a refund. And so we're familiar with that concept. But when that money is withheld, it's considered a withholding. It's a withholding tax that has to be paid. And when we are talking about Firpta, Firpta is a withholding tax. Firpta actually is an acronym. It stands for the Foreign Investment and Property Tax Act. So back in the 80s, our government had this idea that foreigners were coming into the U.S., they were buying up all kinds of property, they were selling it for profits, but there wasn't any mechanism in place to make sure that they filed a tax return, right? So when Felipe, I don't know if you are self-employed or if you have employers or whatever the situation is, but all that money that gets collected from your paycheck, right? At the end of the year, it's motivation for you to file a tax return and try to get some of that money back, right? That's what forces us sometimes to file a tax return, is because we want to settle up with how much tax do we actually owe. So do we owe more? Do we owe less? Do we get a refund? Whatever the situation is. And so that concept of withholding holds true for real estate. So we just have to apply that basic principle of withholding, and we apply it to the sale of property. So if you're a foreign person and you own property here in the United States, when you sell money is going to be withheld from your proceeds to make sure that you file a tax return, settle up with the government on how much you actually owe, and then you can potentially get a refund if you've paid too much. And so if you're foreign and you sell property, the withholding is 15% of the selling price.
Oh, wow.
So think about that. On a $400,000 house, you're talking about $60,000 is going to be withheld. So imagine if you were from Canada or Venezuela or Germany or wherever, and you own a property here and you go to sell it for $400,000 and you walk away from the closing table and you're $60,000 short. You know what I mean? So that's a lot of money. And there are things that we can do to mitigate that so that it doesn't have to be, so much, but it requires planning and you have to take action. So, but that's what Firpta is it's the Tax Act that was enacted back in the 80s to make sure that a portion of those proceeds are held back enough to cover that person's potential taxes. The problem with Firpta, the concept of Firpta, is that our government makes it the buyer's responsibility. Think about that. So go back to my original example of like an employer and an employee. So say I worked for you, right? And you pay me $1,000 a week, right? And you take out money out of my paycheck to pay my taxes. You send it off to the IRS. I go file a tax return, and I don't really owe that much money in taxes, so I get a refund, right? But if you, Felipe, my employer, if you didn't take that money out of my paycheck for me, what are the chances of me sending in $200 every paycheck? Seriously, think about it. Like, what are the chances? Right. It has to be done for us. And and that's why in a real estate transaction, you have a seller who's foreign, who may or may not owe taxes, and then you have a buyer who's making a payment to this foreign person. And so if you've only got two people in a transaction, a buyer and a seller, who's going to be responsible for holding some of that money back out of that I mean, basically it's like a big giant paycheck, right?
Yeah.
Who's gonna hold that money back and send it off to the IRS as an advance tax payment? It's certainly not going to be the guy that has no ties to the U.S., right? So the IRS puts that responsibility on the buyer to make sure that they withhold enough and send it into the IRS as an advance tax payment if indeed the seller is foreign. Now, how do we know if our seller is foreign? Right?
Yeah.
Think about that. So the IRS defines a foreign seller as if it's an individual, it would be a non-resident alien. And so non-resident alien means that they are not a resident of the United States and they're not a citizen of the United States. Firpta does not apply to resident aliens. So like someone who has a green card.
Green card, yeah.
Yeah, so if someone has a green card, they've been granted lawful permanent residency of the U.S., they're a resident. They're not considered foreign because they're a resident of the U.S. So someone with a green card,
have to pay taxes to then eventually
right, like a regular U.S. person,
yeah.
Exactly. And the same thing, sometimes people don't have green cards, but they're still considered residents because they're here on some sort of a visa. They're living here, they're working here, or maybe they're married to a U.S. person and they made an election to be treated as a whatever the situation. There's a lot of times where a person can be a resident and not subject to a foreign tax withholding, even though they're not a citizen. And another example of a foreign person would be like a foreign corporation or a foreign trust or a foreign state. So if you are in like the real estate community, you know that when you look at the property records, you can see that a lot of the properties here in our cities are owned by foreign entities. And so when those foreign entities sell, they're considered foreign, and so the withholding would apply to their sale. And so as a buyer, here I am, this buyer, and I'm out shopping and I'm looking at properties, how am I supposed to know who my seller is? And so the IRS makes it really easy for us, thankfully. They don't always make everything easy, but this one they make pretty easy. And so what they expect the buyer to do is they expect the buyer to find out who their seller is. And one of the ways that we can do this is we can demand from them a statement regarding their foreign status. So like, Felipe, are you a U.S. person?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you sold a property today, then when you sold, you would be asked to sign a document declaring that you are a U.S. person. And that document would have your name and your social security number and your home address, and it would have a statement that you're not foreign. And then you would give that to the title company or whoever's going to do the closing, and that's how they would know that you're not foreign. So as a buyer, if I don't get that document, because I don't even know I'm supposed to have it, if I don't get that document, in theory, I'm supposed to assume that that seller is foreign, which is a really scary thought, to think that I could be somehow involved in your tax matters, right?
Yeah.
What do I have anything to do with your tax matters? So at the end of the day, you're either foreign or you're not. And if you're not foreign, then you have to deliver a statement declaring that you're not foreign, or otherwise a buyer is supposed to withhold. Now, of course, there are some exceptions that have to do with the sales price and how the buyer is going to use the property. And I don't know if we're going to have a ton of time for that, or if we even want to get involved in that, but there are exceptions to the withholding that would apply. But the bottom line is, if you are thinking about buying a house now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you want to start training yourself to think, okay, I have to go about this a little bit differently. Because who's heard of Firpta? Felipe, have you ever heard of Firpta?
I had never heard it before now.
No. Right? And if you could be liable, if your seller ends up being foreign and you don't withhold, and our government finds out about it, they could literally come after you and make you pay the 15% if the seller never filed a tax return.
And then
So if you bought a $400,000 house, a
could they
lien on
put
the
a lien in
property.
your house?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens all the time. So if you're buying a $400,000 house and your seller was foreign and you didn't know to ask or think, or it wasn't being handled properly, all of a sudden you get a notice in the mail for $60,000 plus penalties and interest because your seller was foreign, right? And so that's what's happening. So what we want to do is we just want to be aware. Okay, I'm thinking about buying a property. I'm thinking about buying vacant land, or I'm going to buy, an existing house or a condo or whatever it is I'm going to buy. My first job, my number one job, is to find out if my seller is foreign or not. And if he is, okay, fine, then I've got a job to do, and hopefully the title company or my tax professional or whoever it is that I'm going to turn to for some advice is going to help me through that process so that I don't mess up. But if he's not foreign, that's fine too, but just give me something in writing so I have it in my records, because the IRS says to the buyer, hold on to that document, hold on to that seller declaration that he's not foreign, hold on to it in your records for 5 years. So that tells me that that document is pretty important.
Yeah.
So if the government's telling me that I need to hold on to something in my records for 5 years that says my seller wasn't foreign, I am going to hold on to that document. I'm going to get my hands on that document. I'm going to hold it in my records, because that's my golden ticket. That's my get out of jail free card as a buyer, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And in your experience, obviously when you're buying a house, you're going through a realtor. Are realtors aware of this? Do they have some knowledge of this, or is it kind of like 50-50? Some do it, some don't.
So, there's real estate agents that have been in business a really long time, and there's real estate agents that just got their license. And there's also just a lot of realtors that don't really have a lot of experience working with foreign sellers or foreign investors. And so they don't get to experience it as much as other agents. And I think that ultimately the real estate agents around us, I think they're all doing their best. I don't think there's anyone out there, doing anything malicious, but you don't know what you don't know, right? Remember, we talked about that today.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know what you don't know. And yes, maybe they mention Firpta when you're getting your license for the first time, but they really don't spend a lot of time on it. And so, at the end of the day, even though you trust your real estate agent, or you trust your attorney, or you trust your title company, or you trust this person, to guide you through this process, the IRS is still going to consider you to be responsible, so you just have to make sure that if you are if you are foreign, like, I don't know who's listening right now, but if you are foreign and you own real estate here and you're thinking about selling, you definitely want to work with someone who really understands what Firpta is all about, because you have options. You have options. There's things that you can do. There's things you can do in advance. There's some preparation that you can go through. You just don't want to find out about Firpta at the very last minute, because it just makes it really complicated. Closings can be stressful already. You add in, this withholding tax at the very last minute, and, it can really stress things out.
And in regards to, man, I just lost my my question. I had a question for you. So in regards to the services that you provide, so obviously, we're talking about Firpta and all the things that go into it, right? I remember my question. Before I go to my next question, I remember my question. So, from your experience here in the area, in Southwest Florida, from the little knowledge that I have, we have a lot of foreign buyers, a lot of people from Germany that have homes and have, buy homes here and everything. So this is, for this specific area, it's something that is very important, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Southwest Florida is a mecca for international real estate. So, we can't just walk around not knowing anymore. And I personally, I've made it like my life mission these last couple of years to bring awareness to this. I wish I could do like some sort of a public service announcement, and I guess in some way this is, but from my end, when you get to work with buyers and sellers across the nation, you get to see a lot more examples of when things don't go right. And when things don't go right, it can be so damaging. I mean, I've heard grown men sobbing on the phone. People have had their Social Security income garnished. They've had properties, seized, tax liens, all kinds of stuff. And when you sit back and you look and you think, man, why does this keep happening? Like, what's happening here? It really just comes down to education. People just don't know that it's a thing, and it's a thing. And if you're going to be buying and selling real estate, I mean, you really have to know who the seller is, because if the seller ends up being a foreign person, we need to talk about Firpta. And the problem with real estate transactions is you don't know who the seller is. So you literally have to treat every purchase as if that seller were foreign. I made these shirts. I'm going to have these shirts next week, Felipe, and it says Firpta first. Hashtag Firpta first, right? And that's because every transaction, every purchase, every sale, everything that has to do with real estate is subject to Firpta first, until we figure out that it's not subject to Firpta, because either the seller's not foreign, or there's some sort of an exception, or it's below the threshold, like whatever the situation is. But we don't know that first. We don't know that yet. So every transaction is Firpta first, and that's kind of my message, is that we have to just think about it on every transaction, not just when it's obvious. And if I could hold up my other hand, I would do air quotes. Not just when it's obvious that maybe someone's foreign, because you can't tell anymore, right? Yeah. I had a company call me one time. I'm just going to share this with you. I know we're running out of time, but I had a company call one time, and they're like, hey, we need your help. We just found out the seller was foreign. And I was like, well, what do you mean you just found out? How long have you been working on this closing? And I said, well, why didn't you know that they were foreign? She said, well, they didn't sound foreign. Sound foreign. And it's like, what? You can't go off someone's accent to know if, they're foreign or not. Like, you have to rely on that certification that they make, because they're swearing to you one way or the other if they're U.S. or not. And that's really the bottom line. So what do? We help sellers apply for tax ID numbers. We help them make applications for reduced withholding amounts. We file tax returns to help them get refunds. And then on the buyer side, because buyers are becoming more aware that they have a job to do when it comes to these real estate transactions, but they don't really have anyone to turn to. So we have like this program where it's kind of like Firpta in your corner. We don't really have it's not really a named service, but it's basically like if you're a buyer and you're going to be buying property and you find out that your seller is foreign and you just want to make sure that everything is being handled properly, that the deadlines are being met, that the forms are being prepared right, and you don't have anyone else you can call because maybe no one in your circle really understands Firpta, then reach out to us because we can be your buddy. We can be your advisor in that moment for that transaction to make sure that everything is handled properly. Because it's just good to have someone that really understands it.
So you're kind of on both on the seller side and then on the buyer's side, you're kind of guiding them through the process and holding their hand through the process to make sure that every demand is met, essentially.
Absolutely. We are an equal opportunity helper. So
On
we
both
will help
sides.
whoever it is that needs our help, whether it's the buyer, whether it's a seller. Sometimes
Or the IRS.
the buyer just needs to, or the IRS, right? Or we help title companies, we help other tax professionals, because there's a lot of tax professionals that are awesome at preparing tax returns and estate returns and payroll taxes, and they just don't specialize in Firpta, and that's okay. So we're not an all or nothing kind of company. We will work with people in whatever capacity we need to in order to make sure that the issues with that transaction are as minimal as possible.
Awesome. And then obviously, with you specializing on this, you probably have more knowledge, like you're saying, than other companies that don't specialize on this have other specializations, right?
Right. You know what, Felipe, if you had a skin rash, would you go to a brain surgeon?
No.
No.
I don't think.
No.
I don't know.
And just like you wouldn't go to an esthetician, if you had swelling on the brain. Like, you would go to the specialist that specialized in that piece of medicine that you need. Just like in real estate, you wouldn't go to a commercial real estate and ask them to help you find your first home.
Right.
And you wouldn't go to a first home real estate agent and ask them to list a 90-unit apartment complex.
Right.
You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have to stay within your wheelhouse. And so it's important to work with experts when you're talking about very unique pieces of tax code.
Awesome. A question that I ask, everybody that comes in the show is, in regards to COVID-19, I'm not sure how much it has affected you guys, but wanted to ask anyways, what has it affected you guys positively, negatively, or hasn't affected at all?
I mean, COVID-19 sucks. Can I say that on your show?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, you can say
I mean,
that.
honestly, it's affected so many things, but you have to remember we're an accounting firm, and so we deal with the IRS. And so not only have we felt it personally just within our own business, but we are also seeing it when we're dealing with the IRS. Processing times are longer. Applications that used to take 90 days to process with them are taking 6 to 9 months. So they are extremely backlogged. And it's also been really difficult to work with our clients too, because they're in foreign countries. And so if we're helping them apply for tax IDs, they have to get copies of their passports made, and the government offices are closed in their hometowns. So it's been extremely, extremely challenging. But we are very hopeful, and we stay positive, and we find solutions, and we don't cut corners, but we do put ourselves out there, harder than normal to find a solution that works for everybody, just because it's what it takes, to get these deals done. So, COVID.
I wanted to ask, realtors, buyers, sellers, anybody that wants to know more information about the services that you provide, or maybe want to hire, you guys to kind of help them through the process, where they can find more information, website, social media handles, telephone numbers, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We are Firpta Solutions, and you can tell by the name exactly what we do. We have a website, firptasolutions.com. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. We're everywhere. And then they can call the office too, 239-540-1022. I'll give you my contact details. They can email, they can text, they can go on our website and chat with one of our, live people. We use WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, Zello, whatever it's called. We've got them all. So however they can reach out to us, we will respond.
Awesome. And then Julia, towards the end, what I'd like to do is kind of leave an open canvas here for my guests to leave a message for, their either past customers, future customers, or just a messaging in general. So I wanted to, give you the mic and allow you to leave your message here.
So, wow, that puts me on the spot. Ultimately, we're an accounting firm. We specialize in services for foreign sellers of real estate, but we also specialize in protecting the buyers that are purchasing these properties from these foreign sellers. We feel like everybody deserves a fair shake at things. We believe that sellers should be in a position to get their rightful refund. We believe buyers should be able to buy without worries of any penalties or issues. And so we really just want to be a resource to our community. And the fact that we provide services to me is an afterthought, but we just want to be a resource. We don't always have all the answers, but we sure know how to get the answers. And we just hope that people will, consider us when they are buying or selling real estate and they find out that, it involves a foreign seller.
Awesome. Well, Julia, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time and telling us, informing us and telling us all about Firpta. Like you said, it's kind of a public service announcement here that you're making and making people aware of it. I think it's important, right? Like if people don't know, like you said, you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think it's important.
Right.
Hopefully, people that watch this now, watch in the future, will take that into account, and then if they need some help, they'll contact you guys as well. So I want to thank you again for taking the time, and I appreciate it.
I'm honored, Felipe. Thank you so much for all that you do for, all of your viewers and our community. And we just need so many more people like you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
All right. See you.
Bye.
Bye.